Thank you, Deanna. Good morning. It's 10 o'clock. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB Newsroom. Liverpool FC are calling for an investigation after fans with tickets were tear-gassed and denied access to the Champions League final last night. Police here say the violent clashes outside the stadium were the worst seen at a European football match. UEFA say thousands of fans tried to enter the grounds with fake tickets. Merseyside police, however, say supporters were well behaved. The Reds lost 1-0 to Real Madrid at the Stade de France. The Labour Party is to push for a vote on the Prime Minister's decision to change the Ministerial Code of Conduct. Critics say Boris Johnson's proposals water down the rules, but the Cabinet Office says it's disproportionate for ministers to lose their job for what they say are minor breaches. The changes mean they'll instead face a salary suspension or will need to issue a public apology. A missile strike has destroyed part of a solar power plant in Ukraine as Russia's attacks in the country intensify. CCTV footage captured the moment the bomb hit in the Kharkiv region. Officials say no one was hurt and the power supply has been restored. Well, it comes as Ukraine's President Zelensky says Russian assaults in the surrounding area are becoming worse.
The situation is very complicated, especially in those areas in the Donbass and Kharkiv region where the Russian army is trying to squeeze at least some result for themselves. It's indescribably difficult there, and I'm grateful to all those who withstood this onslaught of the occupiers.
President Zelensky. Well, in America, President Biden will travel to Uvalde, Texas today to pay his respects to the families of those killed in Tuesday's mass school shooting. 19 children and 2 teachers were murdered by gunmen at Robb Elementary School. It's the third mass shooting in the US in the last few weeks. Vice President Kamala Harris says the country should have the courage to take action.
We are not sitting around waiting to figure out what the solution looks like. You know, we're not looking for a vaccine. We know what works on this. It includes, let's have an assault weapons ban. You know what an assault weapon is? You know how an assault weapon was designed? It was designed for a specific purpose, to kill a lot of human beings quickly.
Back in the UK, a major clean-up operation is underway in Devon after a super yacht caught fire and sank. Emergency services are working to prevent oil and fuel spilling further in the marina in Torquay. Firefighters battled the blaze on the 85-foot yacht for hours yesterday before the vessel eventually sank. Thick plumes of black smoke could be seen for miles, with police evacuating a nearby beach and roads. The government is reportedly going to launch a consultation on the use of imperial measurements in Britain later this week. Increasing some use of pounds, ounces, feet and inches is apparently going to be announced to coincide with the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. The UK has used metric units since 2000 following an EU directive. Traders are currently legally required to use metric measurements for sale by weight or the measure of fresh produce. Well, as the UK prepares to celebrate Her Majesty's Jubilee, the Prime Minister says no monarch has served the country so well. In a personal message to the Queen, Boris Johnson thanked her for her exemplary service, praising the institution of the Crown and the exceptional individual who wears it. The PM also described the Queen as a steadying, guiding force for the nation, adding Her Majesty embodied the very idea of what a constitutional monarchy should be. And the legendary jockey Lester Piggott, who won the Derby a record-breaking 9 times, has died, aged 86. The 11-time champion and winner of 30 classics was widely regarded as one of the greatest riders of all time. During a career lasting almost 50 years, he rode nearly 4,500 winners. He rode his first winner, the Chase, at the age of 12 at Haydock in 1948. Mr Piggott's son-in-law, Derby-winning trainer William Haggis, confirmed his death in Switzerland this morning. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now it's back to Deanna.
Good morning, you're watching and listening to GB News, and this is The Political Correction. I'm Deanna Davison, and today I'm joined in the studio by Paul Embry and by Arlene Foster over in Northern Ireland. We are here for the next 2 hours to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge. This is not about journalists talking to journalists, it's about you telling us what you think. Coming up this hour, we are, of course, talking about Partygate after Sue Gray published her report this week into parties that took place in Downing Street during COVID lockdowns. Chancellor Rishi Sunak has announced a £400 discount on all energy bills, part funded by a windfall tax on oil and gas company profits. We discuss what this means for households across the UK. And former Prime Minister Tony Blair is back with hopes of filling a gaping hole left by what he's described as a lack of imagination in British politics. And as ever, here on The Political Correction, we want to hear from you. And with ABBA's epic virtual reunion this week, we're asking which politician would you like to bring back? Tell us by emailing gbviews at GBNews or tweet us at GBNews. This is The Political Correction. Boris Johnson has said the country must move on from Partygate after Sue Gray's much-anticipated report was published this week. The Prime Minister played down his personal involvement in the Downing Street gatherings, but said he took full responsibility. He also said he overwhelmingly believes he should remain in office despite public anger. So, Paul, it's been a pretty turbulent week for the Prime Minister, but what were your thoughts on sort of seeing the aftermath of the reports?
I think they deserve all they get in some respects, Deanna. Politicians who push through these lockdown restrictions, which had such a detrimental impact on people's lives, and they were later found to have, breached the restrictions themselves. So there is a large element of hypocrisy. I'm glad that has been pointed out. But at the same point, I think it's become so tedious, to be honest. I think people across the country are thinking, look, we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. I'm struggling to put food on the table. I'm worried about my job. Public services seem to be falling apart at the seams. The pressure on the National Health Service. I can't get an appointment with my GP. I can't get a passport, so on and so forth. And it seems that Westminster and the SW1 bubble and the media have just become completely immersed in this story and completely obsessed with it. And I'm of the view that yes, it's a story, and of course, as I said at the outset, if politicians are being hypocritical in terms of not following the rules while imploring the rest of the country to follow the rules, yes, that needs to be exposed. Yes, they need to be challenged on it, but there comes a point, surely, where you say, OK, the scrutiny has taken place, now there are other priorities. And I think, if anything, what we're seeing at the moment is an illustration of the very serious disconnect that exists between, on the one hand, the media and the political class, and on the other hand, ordinary people. And until the media, I think, and the political class understand that, then I think that polarisation and that disconnect is going to get worse.
Mm-hmm. And Arlene, what about you? Do you agree with Paul that there is that disconnect, particularly on this story?
Yes, I absolutely do. And I think people are really fed up listening about Partygate. I mean, you opened up by saying, of course, we're talking about Partygate. I would love to come on a political correction where we're not talking about Partygate, to be quite honest with you. But unfortunately, there's still more to come because we do have the Privileges Committee looking at whether the Prime Minister intentionally misled Parliament over what he said around Partygate at the beginning. So that has to come yet. And of course, we do have the COVID public inquiry, which we haven't heard about a lot recently, but that has also to be looked into. So this isn't going to go away, unfortunately, but I think people are sick, sore and tired listening to it. In terms of the Sue Gray report, Deanna, I do think probably the most shocking element of it was the fact that cleaners and those people who keep Number 10 running were the ones that were most disrespected, having to clean up vomit after parties, having to deal with things, being the grown-ups actually in the room, saying this shouldn't be going on in the heart of government. And I'm pleased that Sue Gray actually highlighted that, because those are the people, I know this, you know this, that keep government running. The doorkeepers at Stormont, the doorkeepers in Parliament are the people that are the eyes and ears and know what is going on. So I'm glad that she highlighted that. I'm glad that the Prime Minister personally apologised to them about the behaviour that was going on. But again, it should never have happened, of course.
Agreed. And, you know, on the point about the cleaners there, like you, Arlene, I was really pretty shocked and appalled to read that. You know, that there's no excuse for being in any way either abusive or just disrespectful to people who are there to help. And there's no way they should be cleaning up vomit at all in sort of number 10, let alone because of, you know, parties in the heart of lockdown. So obviously there's all this speculation about what happens next, whether the report changes anything. And we've seen a trickle of kind of MPs come out and share their disappointment. A few have confirmed that they've put letters in. I think one of the things that I found really interesting over the last few days is the number of journalists who've got in touch with me saying, we've heard there's 30 letters in, we've heard there's 40 letters, do you know how many? And there's so much speculation and kind of brouhaha around this, whereas actually no one knows. The only person who knows is Sir Graham Brady. So it's going to be certainly interesting. But Paul, I guess my take is, you know, we've been waiting for this report for so long. Obviously, the Met Police investigation came along, which delayed it. Do you think the report really changes anything, or do you think it's just given ammunition to Boris's critics who are already critical? And for those who are pro-Boris, they've just said there's nothing in it, nothing to see here?
I think it's very odd, because what was the report actually for? Because nobody has resigned as a result of it. It doesn't seem to have been any kind of substantial, far-reaching change as a result of it. And I was struck by Jonathan Powell, who previously worked for Tony Blair, and he said usually when you commission a report of this kind, it's because you want to investigate something serious, and at the end there will be an outcome. Action will have to take place, whether that is, you know, somebody has to resign as a result of wrongdoing or failings, or even if a report exonerates somebody. You know, like, for example, the Hutton inquiry into the death of Dr. David Kelly, where it pretty much exonerated government ministers. With this, it seems to have had no effect at all. So you have to ask yourself, well, OK, if the report has said that people have clearly been guilty of failings and fell short in their duties, then is there anybody going to resign over it? Are any sanctions going to be handed down? So the whole thing, I think, has been quite weird in that respect. I mean, Arlene touched on, and I think it's right, the Privileges Committee. Of course, if the committee finds that the Prime Minister deliberately misled Parliament, then I think we're back into the ball game of demands for his resignation. I think it would be very difficult for him to escape those.
Yeah, I mean, the Privileges Committee, that's going to be months. It's going to go on probably post the summer. And as you sort of have both rightly said, how much longer can we carry on talking about this now? Do we need some kind of COVID amnesty whereby, you know, whatever's happened throughout the pandemic, you know, obviously we need the COVID inquiry to determine whether government made the right decisions. But Arlene, do we need some kind of amnesty now to stop these sort of historic cases being investigated to allow us to move on to the bigger issues?
Have a de facto amnesty amongst the great general public, but amongst the press pack and SW1, as Paul has rightly said, we're in this bubble of trying to find more and trying to find how can we keep the story going. And I think it really does show the disconnect between what happens in the Westminster Village and what happens in the public. Most people have moved on. They want to deal with the issues that they're facing in their everyday lives, not least the cost of living crisis, which of course we're going to discuss later on. But I do think it's indicative of this sort of press pack at Westminster, the mainstream media talking about it, looking for a new take. And it's all about how can we take the Prime Minister out? Is there another side to the story which will actually make it that he will have to resign? And there is an element of it that is linked to Brexit, I have to say. People who don't like the Prime Minister, don't like the fact that he delivered Brexit, and they want to get rid of him. And there's always different reasons why you want to push a story, and certainly there's an element of that going on in relation to Partygate.
Well, we are going to firmly draw a line under Partygate for today's show. We've got far more interesting and exciting things to talk about, and I think the next one is one that Paul is really going to enjoy. Because RMT union members have this week voted in favour of strike action across Network Rail and 13 train operating companies. Members want a decent pay rise, job security and no compulsory redundancies. That's according to RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch. Department for Transport has said strike should always be the last resort, not the first, adding it is hugely disappointing and premature that the RMT is calling for industrial action before even entering discussions. Go on then, Paul, over to you.
Well, I think we should listen to the RMT. I think the
Shocked to hear you
RMT
say
has proved itself to be right over the years on a number of things, not least the effects of privatisation of the railway system, what that has meant in terms of higher fares, bigger subsidies, a disjointed, unreliable, dirty service. You know, the fact that ticket offices now are often closed, the fact that people are paying through the nose, even with short journeys sometimes now. And the RMT has argued that consistently, I think has been proved right. And I think the RMT is worried now about the undermining of the railway system. It's about the integrity of the railway system, plus, of course, their own members' paying conditions. They're worried about redundancies, the impact that will have on an already kind of creaking service. And also, I think, you know, there's the legitimate point that workers such as railway workers and others are being expected during this cost of living crisis to pay the price for decisions which were not their responsibility and for an economic situation that is not their responsibility. I mean, we have had now something like 12 years of a sluggish economy, 12 years of austerity, 12 years of slow growth, 12 years of pretty paltry pay increases. And workers, Deanna, I think, are just fed up. And they're being told again now, you have to tighten your belts. And the things that have occurred in terms of the global financial recession, now the cost of living crisis and what's going on in Ukraine and that impact on it, these are not decisions that workers are responsible for. And I think that when you're in a situation where you're worried about paying the mortgage, where you're worried about putting the food on the table, constantly hearing politicians saying, no, you've just got to accept it, and no, you're not allowed to fight back, no, you're not allowed to withdraw your labour in order to get a better deal for yourself, or if you do, then we're going to try to break your strike action, is not the way to go about it. So listen to the RMT, listen to what I think is a reasonable case, listen to workers right across the country, and accept that there's a case for an increase in wages and better conditions and an economy which doesn't make them pay the price.
But Paul, you talk about workers, obviously, in this case, RMT workers and others working for the train companies. But what about everyone else? What about the people who have to get to work and are going to effectively be held to ransom by the RMT? You must have some sympathy, surely.
Well, it shouldn't be, for me, it shouldn't be a race to the bottom. It shouldn't be about, you know, pitting one group of workers against another group of workers. Now, of course, when people in any organisation, any company, any service withdraw their labour, by definition, there will be a disruption to operations. And of course, you know, you can sympathise with people who are going to be affected by that. But you have to say, look, ultimately, where does responsibility lie? Where does responsibility lie for the fact that workers, for more than a decade now, have had to pay that economic price, as I said, and that workers feel that what's being expected of them is unreasonable, which is to tighten their belts for goodness knows how many more years. We have got a situation, Deanna, where there is very slow growth in the economy, where it's going to be years potentially before people get decent pay increases, where there isn't a plan for real wages to improve, where people are struggling in terms of making ends meet, where living standards have taken a hit, and simply saying to people time and again, oh, if you try and fight back against that or resist it in any way, you're holding the country to ransom and you're being unreasonable. I think that itself is unreasonable. So the government needs to listen to people like the RMT and other unions and other groups of workers who I think have got an absolutely legitimate case.
Arlene, I'm very keen to come to you on this. We've discussed in the past, haven't we, whether unions really are in touch with their membership or whether there's more kind of political reasoning behind their decisions. What do you reckon?
Well, I mean, Paul's talking about workers as if they are not actually part of the economy. The fact is workers are part of the economy and therefore have a role to play in building the economy. And certainly having strikes like the one that is now being proposed will not help the economy to recover. It won't help the economy to grow. In fact, it will set us down in a downward spiral. So I think they're being incredibly short-sighted in terms of trying to make the economy work. And I did note what the Department of Transport had to say in relation to strike action should always be the last resort. The first thing we should do is get around a table and have those discussions. But of course, the fact is the RMT is using this threat of strike action as a sledgehammer. They are trying to force their view into the mainstream instead of actually getting around the table with the employers and trying to work for good. I mean, when I seen the way in which some trade unions working with employers, getting the best for their members, that is the way to move forward, not to set themselves up as the opposition to the employers, but actually to work with the employers to get a better way forward in a realistic way, because of course we are sitting with the after effects of COVID, the fact that we printed so much money to try and deal with the COVID restrictions, and with the fact that money was being given out to businesses to help them to exist. And I mean, there was always going to be an issue to deal with after COVID, and we're now having to deal with it, and it is a huge issue. And can I say to Paul, in relation to nationalisation, it's not working particularly well in Scotland, Paul, I have to say, when we see what's happening with ScotRail at this point in time, and the fact that they're having to reduce the number of services in Scotland. I think that should be a lesson for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Paul, quick rebuttal.
Well, I mean, look, if you look at the record of privatisations over the years, I think by and large, most of them have been pretty disastrous. And I think the railways is probably a good example of that. But what I would say is, look, as I said on the show last week, I've been on strike a number of times myself. It's an agonising decision to take. You know that you're going to take a hit financially. You know that your family is potentially going to suffer because of it. Nobody does that lightly. And when you get, and the RMT vote was a pretty decisive vote, when you get thousands of people voting to withdraw their labour in that way, knowing that they are going to be hit financially, but they feel they have a genuine grievance, you have to listen to people. You know, it's not, going on strike is not a picnic. Going on strike is hard and it's difficult, and it has an impact on you personally in all sorts of ways. And, you know, I agree with Arlene, it should always be a last resort, but I think in this situation it has been a last resort. So I would say to the government, look, instead of taking the sledgehammer approach, and instead of increasing the kind of bellicose rhetoric, and, you know, we don't need to go back to the days of bashing the unions. Some people would say that the Tory government are already in that territory. I would say listen to what they're saying, get round the table, understand the impact on people, understand the fact that the economic situation at the moment means that ordinary workers are paying the price for decisions that were not their responsibility. Get a plan for growth in the economy, get a plan for living standards and real wages to improve. Then there wouldn't be this need for strike action in the first place.
Well, a rallying cry there from Paul on the RMT strike. But we want to hear from you. What do you think? Are the RMT justified in calling for strike action? Or is it going to be an unnecessary disruption for thousands across the country? Let us know. Email us on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBNews. But coming up after the break, we're joined by an energy expert to discuss the Chancellor's announcements this week. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers.
Yeah. We're on the same team, Nick.
Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to The Political Correction. This week, Chancellor Rishi Sunak announced that all households will get a minimum of £400 off their energy bills this October, part funded by a temporary targeted levy on gas and oil company profits. Sunak had been urged by opposition parties to help millions across the country by introducing a windfall tax. And Labour Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves said the government had finally come to their senses. So, Arlene, I'm going to start with you here because we're both quite similar in terms of how we view kind of economic management. So what did you make of the Chancellor's measures announced this week? Particularly, where are we finding the money from?
Well, exactly, because, of course, the temporary windfall tax, which everybody else is calling a windfall tax, let's be honest, only brings in, as I understand, around £5 billion and runs the risk, of course, of disinvestment from the big energy companies. That's what happened back in 2011 when there was a similar tax imposed. And actually what happened was that less tax came in because they decided not to invest. So higher taxes doesn't always mean more money coming into the Treasury. Diana, you and I both know that. So therein lies a problem. And the rest of the money, as I understand, it's coming from borrowing. And of course, borrowing is not free. It costs a lot of money to the government. And therefore, this is inherently not a very conservative move. It may be quite a popular move in terms of giving money out, as it always is. And we are dealing with, I think, the legacy of COVID, the fact that money was handed out to help us get through COVID and the restrictions and to keep businesses afloat. Now people are expecting government to intervene in this way quite regularly. And therefore, it is very much a Labour sort of announcement. Of course, the Chancellor tried to dress it up as something completely different, but I think it should be called for what it is. It is interventionist, and it will cause problems, I think, for the Conservative Party in the future.
Mm-hmm. So, Paul, Arlene there said this felt a little bit more like a sort of Labour intervention, but this isn't a windfall tax, this is a temporary targeted levy, isn't it?
Well, whatever it is, I think Comrade Sunak has dabbled with a bit of socialism and has found that it's quite popular. So credit where it's due. Bravo, well done him. I think it was absolutely the right intervention. I mean, I have to say, I think the case in favour of the windfall tax was, in the end, incontestable. I mean, the truth is that these oil and gas companies are making extraordinary bumper and unexpected profits at the moment for all of the reasons that we know. And the idea that at the same time, when people really are struggling with their energy bills at the other end of the scale, and we've got a serious cost of living crisis, that it would somehow be unreasonable to go to those big companies and say, actually, we are going to tax you a bit more on your profits so that we can alleviate some of the financial pressures on some of our poorest people. The idea that that is somehow unreasonable or wrong, I think is itself, I think, a wrong argument and unreasonable. So yeah, I think it's the right move at the right time. However, going back to the conversation we were having a few moments ago, I think there's a danger that it just becomes a sticking plaster, actually. The energy price cap, for example, is likely to go up again in October. We're potentially likely to see an increase in bills of around £800 potentially for some people there. So the real task is to make sure that we get growth into the economy and that we find a way of getting real wages up and we get living standards up, we increase productivity, we increase our competitiveness. So we're not having to rely every time there's a bit of a financial crisis on these sorts of taxes, that people have got the high wages and decent living standards to be able to get them through periods like this.
Well, let's talk about energy, because I'm delighted to say we're joined by energy expert and founder of the company Cubes, Joe Gilbert. Hi, Joe. Thank you for joining us on the show this morning. What did you make of the Chancellor's announcements this week? Do you think they go far enough?
I think the Chancellor's clearly listened to concerns for support for those in fuel poverty. We did need targeted support and focus, particularly for the most vulnerable. And, you know, like you've already mentioned, in October, there is another huge increase coming, which will mean over the last 12 months, we've seen energy bills increase by £1,500 just in the last year alone. So I think the measures he's announced are welcomed. However, the underlying problem for millions of households will remain in October, and there will be millions more households that are pushed into that fuel poverty bracket. So he's definitely cushioned the blow slightly, I'd say, but I think the shockwaves of the further increase in October are going to be felt quite wide. You know, they're going to be far-reaching.
Do you think it might call for another set of measures from October, Joe?
What I'd like to see from October is some more targeted measures rather than just keep throwing cash at this issue. As you've already said, it is a bit of a sticking plaster. We need to address the root cause, really. And I think we do need some reassurance that there are some measures and plans coming to actually improve the energy efficiency of homes so that we do see a real reduction in energy consumption. And obviously that will also go towards carbon reduction and net zero targets. So I don't think the answer always is throwing cash at these things, but obviously, there are millions of households that are struggling with this cost of living and, you know, definitely the increases in their energy bills. So I'd like to see some longer term measures, particularly on improving, the efficiency of people's homes so you can keep the homes warmer without necessarily having to burn as much energy. And also a social tariff. So it is more targeted, a means tested social tariff. So we are targeting those that are most in need of this support rather than a blanket £400 support for every household. You know, there are some, households like myself, I didn't need the £400, but there are many others. You know, we saw lots of feedback on the £200 loan that wasn't a loan, and the payback. A lot of households didn't want it. And we're getting the same feedback on this £400 rebate as well.
Mm-hmm. I just want to touch on the point you made there about energy efficiency. There have been a few things that have been a few steps taken, such as, reducing VAT on things that you can buy for your own home to make them more energy efficient. But what practical steps can government take to kind of really help improve this and improve it quickly, particularly for homeowners? Because if you're buying insulation or solar panels, it's quite costly in the short run, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think in terms of funding, so particularly for local authorities, social housing providers, there is low interest funding that, can be made available via the industry. And we can, there are EPC budgets and targets at the moment where, social housing providers are actually being required to actually bring the EPC rating of these properties up to scratch by 2030. And there is budgets that has been spent on EPC for energy efficiency. I think if there was solar and battery storage installed in more homes, then you could actually optimise the use of that battery, and we'd have less reliance then on wholesale markets and these fluctuating price hikes. So there would still be a need to be grid connected for the backup supply, but I think the more that we can bring supply in at local measures, particularly with solar and battery storage, that would be a good move.
Brilliant. Well, Joe, we've had a lot of chats on our show in the past about sort of energy security as well, so we'd love to get you back on in the future to perhaps have a discussion about that. But Joe Gilbert there, founder of Cubes, an energy expert. Thank you for joining us this morning. Now, comedian Ricky Gervais has caused controversy with his latest stand-up show, Supernature, which has been labelled dangerous, anti-gay and anti-trans by a US LGBT rights group. The 60-year-old comedian, regarded as one of Britain's funniest men, said that comedy should be used for getting us over taboo subjects. Here he is trying to explain the way he uses humour.
Welcome to my show. It's not a show. There's no dancers or jugglers. It's basically a bloke talking, which is essentially what stand-up comedy is, isn't it? A bloke talking. Sexist. What about all the funny female comedians? Like, No. Right. No. I'm not doing that. OK, right. That was irony, OK? There's going to be a bit of that throughout the show. See if you can spot it, OK? Now, that's when I say something I don't really mean for comic effect, and you as an audience, you laugh at the wrong thing because you know what the right thing is. It's a way of satirising attitudes. Like that first joke, I used the old-fashioned sexist trope that women aren't funny. Now, in real life, I know there are loads of funny women. Like, I did it again. Well spotted. Good.
Well, there we go, a clip there from Ricky Gervais's show. Well, to talk to us more about whether Ricky Gervais should be cancelled is comedian Leo Kearse. Leo, thank you for joining us. Now, you've had a few run-ins with audiences in the past, haven't you?
Yeah, and with censors and with social justice warriors who've campaigned to try and get me banned and successfully got me banned from like my venue at the Perth Fringe in Australia. But yeah.
But was it that they were frustrated with the things you were saying, or was it just because you weren't funny?
No, well, a lot of times they didn't give me a chance to be funny. That was cancelled before my run started because they'd seen some clip online that they decided was transphobic or whatever, and then yeah, got a campaign going and got me pulled.
Mm-hmm. I think it must be such a minefield for you as comedians. I was at a comedy show a few weeks ago, and a guy made a joke about how people will do anything these days for beauty standards. So if the Kardashians got told that going and fighting in Iraq would give them a booty lift, they'd go and do it. And there was a girl in the front row sitting there like this. And he said, "You all right?" She goes, "Joking about war isn't funny." And the whole room just kind of turned. And do you face a lot of that as a comedian these days?
Yeah, I mean, audiences can be weird. A lot of comedians are getting, even like quite right-on comedians are getting. I don't know what it is. Audiences coming out of COVID, they seem more empowered to even get up on stage and grab the mic off people if they think that they're committing some kind of hate crime. But people seem to think that everything should be tailored specifically to them, not to a room of 200 people. So you've seen comedians like Jeff Innocent. So Jeff Innocent jokes about race, but he's in a mixed race relationship. His wife is black, his children are mixed race. So when he jokes about it, he's obviously coming from an informed place, and he's not being nasty. He's not being racist. Like, it just definitely isn't. You wouldn't be able to perform on the London circuit for very long if you came out and you're doing overtly racist, nasty stuff. But yeah, he was somebody got up on stage and tried to wrestle the microphone out of his hand because they were convinced. What it was somebody who was drunk, hadn't been paying attention, heard a few trigger words, and instead of thinking, oh, maybe I should give the comedian the benefit of the doubt, they thought they should take it into their own hands. But that's the culture. I think Twitter and social media has developed this culture where people get outraged straight away. They know they can get attention for being outraged. They're not going to have any negative blowback for being outraged and voicing their outrage. So why not do it in real life?
Yeah, Paul?
Leo, we often hear the phrase these days in the context of comedy about punching down. Comedians should always seek to punch up and not punch down. And that is actually something that, excuse me, Ricky Gervais has been accused of following this recent show. Was Ricky Gervais punching down there, or was he more punching up towards the elites who peddle the sort of ideology that he was attacking? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've kind of answered your own question there. I mean, progressives do have this sort of hierarchy of oppression with, I think, transgender Muslims are at the top of it and straight white men are at the bottom of it. So, anybody who jokes about anything further up the oppression pyramid is punching down, or punching in that direction. But yeah, he wasn't attacking transgender people, and he's spoken out and said, he supports transgender rights, he supports human rights, which apply to everyone, obviously. And genuine transgender people who put the effort in and transition and look like the gender they're transitioning to, Obviously, absolutely, he has no problem with them, using whatever toilet they need to use or whatever. But he's mocking the ideology that says, somebody like me could just say, I'm a woman and I'm a woman. And that's obviously ridiculous. You can't just say, my pronouns are she and her. That doesn't make me a woman. That's a ridiculous ideology. And this is why comedy is so dangerous to people in power. So the people who have the cultural power at the moment, the woke left, weak ideologies crumble immediately under any scrutiny. And under any mocking. So you see, people in power, the first thing they do, like the Taliban when they came back into power, they killed the comedian who mocked them. And it's the same with the woke progressives. Anybody who mocks them, who exposes the idiocy, comedy's got a power to just expose an obvious truth that you're not allowed to say. So anybody who mocks them, they straight away, they want to wipe that out, like Putin wiping out anybody who mocks him.
Mm. It strikes me as well that with a comedian like Ricky Gervais, he can be a bit close to the wire, but he offends everyone. He makes jokes about everyone, regardless of demographics or anything. So is that not equal opportunities comedy?
Yeah, absolutely. He's an equal opportunities offender, as Jerry Sadowitz, another offensive comedian, describes himself. So yeah, it's ridiculous that he mocks all these different types of people and mocks all these ideas throughout the show. But the only one he gets any stick for is when he touches on transgender issues, and he raises some of the issues he's raising, like the sort of undercurrent of violent misogyny. Well, it's more of an overcurrent of violent misogyny in the trans rights. Some elements of the trans rights community. He raises that when he's saying to the woman, he calls her a TERF. You can see the male aggression there, and I think we've seen that with the Emmeline Pankhurst statue, the scenes we saw there with the males in balaclavas intimidating and actually assaulting women. That's something that needs to be brought to the fore and needs to be discussed.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think so. And I must say, you talked about the sort of hierarchy of comedy. Try being a Tory. We are always right at the bottom of that list. Leo, thank you so much for joining us. Leo Kearse, comedian there. Now, stay with us because coming up on The Political Correction, we're talking about the upcoming Jubilee weekend and former Prime Minister Tony Blair, who may be making a return to politics. And that's not the only return, because with ABBA's epic virtual reunion this week, we're asking which politician would you like to bring back? Tell us by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. See you soon.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to The Political Correction. And as always, loads of you getting in touch with us, especially on the story about the RMT strikes. We've got Darren here. One for you, Paul, says, God help us if Labour get back in, as the left-wing unions will try and take us back to the 70s. Unlike Paul, I remember this well, and the country was a mess.
Well, I have to say I'm not quite sure it was a complete mess. I mean, during the 70s, for example, most families were able to enjoy a reasonable standard of living on the wages of one earner. They were able to afford to buy their own house. We didn't have the astronomical house prices we've got today. So, you know, the 1970s certainly were not perfect, but I don't think they were quite the grim times that many people make them out to be. On energy, Graham says, if this government won't respect the ballot box and democracy, then why should we? Stiff action needs to be taken by the people if the government fails to hold a referendum over net zero and green subsidies, which were never voted for.
Oh, well, loads more views, which we will come to in a little while, but we've got two excellent guests in this section. So let's move on, because for many in the country, this next week will be filled with jubilation as we approach the Jubilee weekend, with 4 days of celebrations to mark 70 years of service from Her Majesty the Queen. But of course, not everyone will be getting in a festive mood, including our next guest, who wants to see the monarchy abolished and the Queen replaced with an elected democratic head of state. He is Graham Smith, and he's the CEO of Republic, who believe that hereditary public office goes against every democratic principle. Graham, thank you for joining us this morning. So I'm guessing you are not so excited about the Jubilee.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, no, of course not. I don't think that it's a good thing to celebrate that one person has been head of state for that long. In a democracy, there should be the opportunity every few years to choose who our head of state is. So that's something which I think we should be looking to do in the future. What I am pleased about is that I'm not in a minority on the lack of interest. I mean, there's polling showing that most people are not particularly interested in it. Only 11% said that they're very interested. Only 14% are organising, making any plans to celebrate the Jubilee. Most people are going to enjoy the long weekend, which hopefully will have wonderful weather like we've got here today. And I think that also there is a significant shifting in attitudes around the monarchy. We've seen over the last few years that support for retaining the monarchy has dropped from 75% to 60%, and support for abolition has jumped up to 27%. So it's over more than 1 in 4 people now want to get rid of it. So there's a fairly significant shift in attitudes and views on monarchy and the Jubilee. And I think that debate has to take off after the Jubilee and as we get towards the succession, because King Charles is not going to be anything like as popular as the Queen.
Arlene, you don't look convinced.
Well, I'm not convinced at all. And I think actually the advertisements on Make Elizabeth the Last are grossly offensive to those of us who see the dedication, the duty, the service that Her Majesty the Queen has given to this nation and indeed the world. And I completely disagree that the monarchy will not continue after Her Majesty the Queen passes away. I think there's a continuity there that is so strong. And I think to suggest that the nation would give the loyalty and really the love that they give to the monarch, that they would give that to an elected head of state is just for the birds, frankly, and it would certainly not happen. And I think that the monarchy is something that transcends us. It is so wonderful to have it here in the United Kingdom, and it will last very much into the future. And it's just so sad to see joy killers that want to make this Jubilee weekend something that it certainly will not be.
Graham, joy killer, is that accurate?
Well, no, that's ridiculous. And people taking offence at other people expressing their views is equally ridiculous. I mean, you know, we do not need to have love and affection for our head of state. It's a job to be done by someone that should be independent of government and should be chosen by the people. Ireland, Iceland, Finland, you know, these countries managed to do this. They elect excellent heads of state who have poll ratings similar to, if not greater than, the Queen, and they do this job having been elected by the people. It's something which we can do very easily, and we can then move on from the monarchy. I would say that for most people, the monarchy is the Queen and the Queen is the monarchy. And I think this is why the message is Make Elizabeth the Last, because Charles does not have the same support. He is easy to criticise without getting people riled up and upset. And, he is not going to sustain the kind of level of support that we've got at the moment. We've seen, as I said, support for the monarchy dropping over the last few years from 75 to 60%, and that's on the Queen's watch. She is by far and away the most popular royal. She is sustaining that level of support. The idea that Charles will turn that around and push it back up again is for the birds, to quote Arlene.
Graham, I'm a fellow Republican, I have to say, but tactically, wouldn't it be wise just for the next few weeks for us to keep our heads down a little bit? Because, I mean, the truth is that millions of people across this country are going to buy into this Jubilee. It's going to be seen by lots of people as a little bit of light relief during, particularly difficult times with the cost of living crisis, etc. And I tend to think that actually, if you're going to advance the cause of republicanism, it's probably best not to really go full throttle on it during a period when the country is pretty upbeat about something that the royal family is doing. Do you not think there's a danger you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot a little bit here?
Well, no. I mean, we ran campaigns during in the run-up to the 2011 wedding for Kate and William. We did so for the last Jubilee and for the last big wedding in 2018, Harry and Meghan. The point is to not allow people to portray the whole country as being hugely excited by these events when that simply isn't the case. And it's not to allow people to be silenced on what is essentially a political issue. It used to be the case that Republicans all sort of said, well, I'm going to go and hide away and essentially cede all this, the whole country to the monarchists. So I think that it's much better to, we're not telling people don't celebrate the Jubilee. If you like the monarchy, if you like the Queen, you want to celebrate it, have a great time. But what we're trying to say is that most people are not doing that. And there is a wider political issue to debate whilst everybody is talking about this. And to stress to particularly broadcasters, make sure that you are reflecting the breadth of and diversity of opinion and not suggesting, as is often the case, that everybody is joining in, because they aren't. So I think what we're saying is that whilst this is on the news, whilst this is being talked about, that's the time to think about the Constitution, about the future. And by the way, we are not a country that is gearing up to celebrate en masse. It is a minority interest. Absolutely fine for that minority to be excited by it. But, there is a wider, more serious constitutional issue to discuss.
Well, Graham Smith there, CEO of Republic, joining us to talk about the monarchy. Graham, thank you for your time today. I don't know how I feel about that as a minority interest, though. I mean, there's communities all over the country celebrating the Jubilee in every single corner. But let us know, do you think that the monarchy should continue? Will you be celebrating the Jubilee weekend? Email us on gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, this summer, former Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair will host a Future of Britain conference in a bid to, in his words, fill a gaping hole left by a lack of imagination in British politics. It's being reported the lineup may include French President Emmanuel Macron, and speculation is rife as to whether Blair is returning to a life in politics. In an interview back in March, he said he wanted to advise the next Labour government. Well, joining us now to discuss this story further is former political advisor to Tony Blair, John McTernan. John, tell us a bit about this conference.
Well, it's a continuation of the work of the Tony Blair Institute, which ever since Tony set it up, he's been developing policy for any centre-left, any progressive party in the world to use. He's got this international network. He's thinking about issues all the time. He's never really left politics. I mean, just look at the way he assisted the government in the rollout of the vaccine program. It was Tony that came up with the idea of separating the doses so we could get twice the number of people covered. And he's just been relentlessly focusing on why can't we be answering the big questions facing the country in the 21st century? Whether it's about AI or whether it's about climate change, there are massive debates that we need to be seeing our politicians focused on. And this conference, we're bringing together great progressive voices, successful progressive voices, one who win elections, into one place so we can learn from each other. So it's an amazing opportunity for anybody who wants to see reform and transformation in the UK.
Mm-hmm. John, The problem is that, yes, he did win elections, but he won elections, and I say this as a long-standing activist in the Labour movement who was very glad to see Labour win elections, but he did so in a very different world to the one we're living in today. And the truth is, this conference seems to me just about reinforcing that kind of hyper-progressive, centrist, liberal agenda that actually has done so much in Britain and beyond to alienate ordinary working class blue collar voters. It gave us Brexit in part, it gave us a 2019 general election in part. Labour has become a much more metropolitan kind of middle class party since. Why do we want to go back to those days? That's not how we're going to rescue the Labour Party, is it?
This conference is about the future. I know that Tony would not run a new Labour programme today. What he would do is the same thing that he and Gordon Brown and Peter Mandelson did in the mid-90s, which is look at where we are, look at where the party is, look at where the country is, look at where the voters are, and look at the challenges facing the country. The great thing about 1997 was there was a massive programme sitting behind the slogans that we had. It wasn't just for the many, not the few. We knew how to actually deliver for the many and not just the few. And it wasn't just, leadership, not drift. It was demonstrating leadership in ideas, in program, in ambition. And that's the point. The point is you need a new program for 2022. It's the 21st century. Of course, we don't need to, in 1997, Labour had to get rid of outside toilets in primary schools. That is the state of the country we inherited. It's hard to imagine that now, harder even to remember that's actually true. And this is now about what is the next agenda. That's why you're bringing in Macron. Half of the population of the European Union live under centre-left or centrist governments. America has got Biden, Canada's got Trudeau, Australia has got Albo, New Zealand's got Jacinda. There's a lot to learn from the turn across the world to centrist progressive ideas. We need that here. We need transformation in our government now. Everybody understands we've got a government that are simply campaigning in office. They're not governing. They're not making decisions. This ridiculous thing about bringing back the perch, the rood and the hide, amongst other imperial measures, it's just ridiculous. It's trying to get a headline for the day and then move on, a headline for the next day and move on. What you need is substantial policy about how do you reindustrialize the country while decarbonising the economy, which will give us blue-collar jobs all across the country. There's all kinds of challenges. We need to get into them, and that's why talking about ideas is important. We've got a government that don't want to talk policy. We should have an opposition that talk ideas, and reform.
Well, John, thank you for your time. I'm sure we could carry on this discussion, but that's all we've got time for now. John McTernan there, former political advisor to Tony Blair. Well, that's it for the first hour here on The Political Correction, and we always want to hear from you, as we've said with ABBA's epic virtual reunion this week. We're asking, which politician would you like to bring back? Tell us about all the other stories we've been discussing today by emailing us on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. See you shortly.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning. You're watching and listening to GB News. Coming up this hour, we're joined by Conservative MP Sir Robert Goodwill for our regular We Work For You segment. We're asking whether it's time for much stricter gun control in the United States. And Northern Ireland celebrates its 100th birthday, but will it be around for another century? That plus plenty more after the latest news with Olivia.
Thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. Here's the latest in the GB newsroom. Liverpool Football Club are calling for an investigation after fans with tickets were tear-gassed and denied access to the Champions League final last night. Police here say the violent clashes outside the stadium in Paris were the worst seen at a European football match. UEFA say thousands of fans tried to enter the grounds with fake tickets. Merseyside police, however, say supporters were well behaved. The Reds lost 1-0 to Real Madrid at the Stade de France. A missile strike has destroyed part of a solar power plant in Ukraine as Russia's attacks in the country intensify. CCTV footage captured the moment the bomb hit in the Kharkiv region. Officials say no one was hurt and the power supply has been restored. It comes as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russian assaults in the surrounding areas are becoming worse.
The situation is very complicated, especially in those areas in the Donbass and Kharkiv region where the Russian army is trying to squeeze at least some result for themselves. It's indescribably difficult there, and I'm grateful to all those who withstood this onslaught of the occupiers.
President Joe Biden will travel to Uvalde, Texas today to pay his respects to the families of those killed in Tuesday's mass school shooting. 19 children and 2 teachers were murdered by a gunman at Robb Elementary School. It's the third mass shooting in the US in the last few weeks. Vice President Kamala Harris says the country should have the courage to take action.
We are not sitting around waiting to figure out what the solution looks like. You know, we're not looking for a vaccine. We know what works on this. It includes, let's have an assault weapons ban. You know what an assault weapon is? You know how an assault weapon was designed? It was designed for a specific purpose, to kill a lot of human beings quickly.
The Labour Party is to push for a vote on the Prime Minister's decision to change the Ministerial Code of Conduct. Critics say Boris Johnson's proposals watered down the rules, but the Cabinet Office says it's disproportionate for ministers to lose their job for what they say are minor breaches. The changes mean MPs will instead face a salary suspension or will need to issue a public apology. A major clean-up operation is underway in Devon after a super yacht caught fire and sank. Emergency services are working to prevent oil and fuel spilling further in the marina in Torquay. Firefighters battled the blaze on the 85-foot yacht for hours yesterday before the vessel eventually sank. Thick plumes of black smoke could be seen for miles, with police evacuating a nearby beach and roads. The government is reportedly going to launch a consultation on the use of imperial measurements in Britain later this week. Increasing some use of pounds, ounces, feet and inches is apparently going to be announced to coincide with the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. The UK has used metric units since 2000 following an EU directive. Traders are currently legally required to use metric measurements for sale by weight or the measure of fresh produce. As the UK prepares to celebrate Her Majesty's Jubilee, the Prime Minister says no monarch has served the country so well. In a personal message to the Queen, Boris Johnson thanked her for her exemplary service, praising the institution of the crown and the exceptional individual who wears it. The PM also described the Queen as a steadying, guiding force for the nation, adding Her Majesty embodied the very idea of what a constitutional monarchy should be. And the legendary jockey Lester Piggott, who won the Derby a record-breaking 9 times, has died, aged 86. The 11-time champion and winner of 30 classics was widely regarded as one of the greatest riders of all time. During a career lasting almost 50 years, he rode nearly 4,500 winners. He rode his first winner, the Chase, at the age of 12 at Haydock in 1948. Mr Piggott's son-in-law, Derby-winning trainer William Haggis, confirmed his death in Switzerland this morning. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now back to Deanna.
Good morning. You're watching and listening to GB News, and this is The Political Correction. We're here for the next hour to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge. Coming up this hour, we have our regular We Work For You segment with the new chair of the DEFRA Select Committee, Sir Robert Goodwill. As Northern Ireland celebrates its centenary, we look at the region's history and discuss, will the Union survive another 100 years? And following this week's appalling events in Texas, we discuss, is it time for more stringent gun controls in the United States? Also, with ABBA's epic virtual reunion this week, which politician would you like to bring back? Tell us by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. This is The Political Correction. Well, welcome back. On The Political Correction, we explore the work done by our elected representatives, what they get up to on the ground, and as legislators to serve us and the constituents who elect them. Today's guest has this week been elected as chair of the influential Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee in the House of Commons, and as well as having served in various ministerial positions, represents a rural Yorkshire constituency and continues to be a voice for his community. Delighted to say the MP for Scarborough and Whitby, Sir Robert Goodwill, joins us now. Hi, Robert. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
So it's been an exciting week for you.
Yes, I mean, it was a hotly contested election. There were 5 candidates went forward, and it went down to the line. They were eliminated in turn, and at the end there were just 2 standing, and I got it at the end actually by a reasonable margin. But yes, it was an exciting campaign. I'm really pleased to have been elected and got the confidence of my colleagues, because it's a really difficult time, an exciting time, a challenging time for agriculture, for the environment, and of course for the fishing industry as the transition goes through to controlling more of our waters.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the interesting things, Robert, about select committees is how they are so different from what a lot of people see happening in Westminster. You know, they see the Punch and Judy politics of sort of Prime Minister's Question Time, but it's not like that at all on select committees usually, is it?
No, I mean, we gain evidence. This is not about the members sort of themselves politically grandstanding. It's about getting experts in, getting ministers before the committee, and actually producing detailed reports with recommendations to the government. And, you know, for a select committee to be successful, it had to be genuinely cross-party and trying to keep everybody together. Occasionally, committees can't agree, and they end up with sort of minority reports being published by one side. But I think my job as the committee chair is to keep everybody working together, and in particular, I think shining a very bright light on government ministers into those sort of dark crevices of government policy that we can explore.
Now, you've been an MP for a while now, Robert. What are some of the kind of key lessons you've learned? If you could kind of go back and speak to yourself on day one, what advice would you give?
Well, I mean, the first thing when you get elected, and I took my seat like you from the Labour Party in 2005. They'd had a Labour MP for 8 years. The main thing is to get dug in your own constituency. Make sure that you're well known, get involved with local organisations, and most importantly, I think to make sure that you have a good team of staff, caseworkers dealing with those problems. Because a lot of people come to an MP if they've got a problem with housing, with benefits. Recently, we've been working with constituents who are adopting or making homes for Ukrainians and trying to sort out those visas. So, there's a lot of hard work. And if you've got a good team behind you, they can deal with those everyday problems so that people know if they come to the MP, we can sort of, if you write to an organisation, it pretty much gets to the top of that organisation if the letter comes from an MP. And similarly, if we contact a minister, they know if the MP isn't satisfied with the response, we can always stand up in Parliament and raise it in the chamber. So, generally speaking, MPs can get problems sorted for constituents.
And what are some of your proudest achievements in the time in which you've been an MP?
Well, I think at the Department for Transport, where I was in the opposition transport team, and we managed to get I got some policies into the manifesto. One on drug driving. In the old days, if a policeman stopped somebody for drug driving, they had to sort of make them close their eyes and touch their nose or walk along a line at the side of the road. And I introduced the idea that we should have a drugalyzer. So now every time I read somebody's been done for drug driving in the paper, I think, well, that probably wouldn't have happened had it not been for what we've done. And the other thing at Transport was the HGV levy. So foreign trucks didn't used to have to pay to use our roads. British trucks pay quite a lot of money for their vehicle excise duty. So we introduced that, and that's raised over £300 million since it was introduced. So when people say MP should be paid on results, I'd be happy to take 1% of that.
Well, Robert, you've been a frontbencher and a backbencher. How does it compare, and which do you prefer?
Well, it's always nice to be a minister because you're actually in the driving seat. You can make decisions. Sometimes quite frustrating because there's things you might want to do that you can't sort of get your colleagues to agree to. But yeah, I mean, being in the driving seat, being a minister is really exciting and interesting. But then, as chairing a select committee, as I will be doing starting a week on Tuesday, then, we are able to, get issues raised, look at some of the real challenges. I mean, food, who would have thought, a year ago that we'd been worried about whether there was enough food in the world to feed everybody. And now with the situation in Ukraine, we need to look at how our new environmental policies that we're bringing in under the new freedoms we have outside the European Union, how they can actually ensure that we can still produce the food we need to feed not only this country, but much of the developing world.
So are you planning to do work around food security on the committee?
Yes, I mean, we've got a number of reports that we're doing at the moment, which we'll need to finish. But then, in consultation with my colleagues, I think one of the issues we need to look at is how we can, as a country, become more self-sufficient in the food we produce. Well, obviously, we're never going to produce bananas and mangoes, but, the sort of food we can produce, how we can produce more. And at the same time, deliver sustainable agriculture, because what we don't want to have is an agricultural industry that doesn't contribute to our net zero obligations, that doesn't improve the way that our soils, air quality, and animal welfare. So I think we need to be able to see if we can deliver all those things in parallel. But I think the focus is more than ever before on how we can produce adequate supplies of food in this country. I mean, for example, in my constituency, we have the McCain chip factory, the famous oven chips are produced in Scarborough, and they've now had to switch from using sunflower oil, which majority of which came from Ukraine, to using a combination of rapeseed oil and sunflower oil. So, changes will have to be made. We'll have to look at how we do supply those foods and how we can improve our carbon footprint of agriculture.
Brilliant. Well, Robert, thank you so much for your time this morning and sharing your insights. And I think once you've got into the job, we'd love to have you back on to talk about some of those inquiries that your committee is running as well. Robert Goodwill there,
thank you very
MP.
Much.
Hey, not at all, Robert. Thank you, MP for Scarborough and Whitby, and now chair of the EFRA Select Committee. Now, this week, the people of Northern Ireland celebrated the region's 100th birthday. Around 25,000 people took part in an Orange Order parade to commemorate the centenary, with unionists using the celebrations to reaffirm their commitment to preserving Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom. But with disputes over the protocols still dominating much of the political agenda, and nationalists holding the most seats in Stormont for the first time, How optimistic should we be about the preservation of the Union? And will Northern Ireland still be part of our great nation for another 100 years? Arlene, I want to come to you first. How have the people of Northern Ireland been celebrating?
Well, first of all, this was a delayed celebration, of course, because it should have been last year was the 100th birthday, but because of COVID, the celebration was delayed to now. And just to correct you, Diana, Nationalists don't have the largest number of seats in the Northern Ireland Assembly. Sinn Féin is the largest party, but Nationalism is still behind Unionism in terms of seats. Yesterday was great. We had a fabulous parade, 25,000 on parade, the police say, and 100,000 people were spectating. So it was lovely to meet up with people again and do all the things that we used to do before COVID, just to catch up and have conversations. So it was a wonderful celebration of our place within the United Kingdom, and families, young people, older people. I don't know where I fall within that, probably somewhere in the middle. We were all there having a great day and enjoying ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And Arlene, there is a speculation at the moment, isn't there, that there's sort of a growing movement within Northern Ireland seeking to kind of reunify and leave the UK. Do you think in 100 years that Northern Ireland will still be a part of the UK?
Well, you know, a bit like the anti-monarchist we had on earlier, Republicans are very good at spinning what they're doing. And actually, if you look at the percentage poll for Northern Ireland, Republicanism and nationalism hasn't grown since 1998, but they're very good at spinning their story. As I say, just like the Republican we had on talking about getting rid of the monarchy, these people want to abolish Northern Ireland. They want to abolish our place within the United Kingdom. And of course, there is an economic, rational, logical and emotional argument for us staying within the United Kingdom. It's just about making that in the same way as others are trying to argue that a United Ireland is inevitable. It's not inevitable. We need to disrupt that narrative. I certainly will continue to disrupt that narrative because it's just simply not true.
Mm-hmm. Arlene, I'm interested in your take on the demographic debate, because we're told, aren't we, that Catholics are very close to outnumbering Protestants in Northern Ireland, and that may lay the path for a united Ireland, amongst other things. I mean, do you buy that? I mean, do you think the demographic argument is strong enough? Because it is not the truth that actually lots of people nowadays, particularly the younger generation, are more secular in their outlook on life and don't necessarily fall into those old categories of years gone by, you know, as they did during the Troubles, for example.
Well, I think that's very true, Paul, and I think a lot of people have been waiting on the census figures, which I think are due to come out later this year. Undoubtedly, they will show that the Roman Catholic faith is probably the strongest faith in Northern Ireland in terms of numbers. A lot of those people are secular Catholics, as I would call them. They don't really adhere to the teachings of the Church. But there's somebody coming in to see me. They don't really adhere to the teachings of the Church. But they also are people who work for the BBC, they work for the National Health Service, and their future is linked in with our future membership of the United Kingdom. So I think it's really quite poor sectarianism, actually, when you go down to the level of there's more Catholics, therefore there's going to be a united Ireland. I don't buy into that at all. There are many people who may vote for a nationalist party in an assembly election, for example, but if it came to a referendum on our remaining within the United Kingdom, they would stay within the United Kingdom because, as I say, it's an economic, rational, logical argument in terms of unionism.
Mm-hmm. And Arlene, you sent some photos through, I think, of some of the celebrations, which we're going to get up on screen now. There we go.
That's us out yesterday. That was before the parade took place. I hope you all liked my scarf, which I had on specially for the day. And we just had great fun, as I said, meeting up with old friends, which of course those people are. That's Lord Dodds and his wife Diane, and Emma Little-Pengelly, who is an MLA in the Stormont Assembly. So yeah, we had a great day's fun, and I think everybody enjoyed themselves.
Brilliant. Thanks, Arlene. Well, coming up next on The Political Correction, we discuss whether and how there should be tighter restrictions on firearms in the United States following this week's horrific events in Uvalde, Texas. And is the prospect of a carbon footprint tracker a cause for concern? And as you know, we want to hear from you because with ABBA's virtual reunion this week, if you could bring back any political figure from history, who would it be? Let us know on gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. This is a political correction.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
Welcome back to The Political Correction, and loads of you getting in touch, particularly after our chat with the guy from Republic. We've got Linda here who says, leave the monarchy alone. They bring loads of money into the country in terms of tourism. Paul?
Louise, similar vein, says, yes, wholeheartedly, we should keep the monarchy. I'm with Arlene all the way. Some of the major shops need to be called out on their lack of support and memorabilia they have on sale, compulsory selling of merchandise in favour of the monarchy. They're too busy following the woke ideology.
Arlene?
That must have been difficult for you, Paul. Yes. Janine says, yes, I do think we should keep the monarchy. They bring in millions of tourists every year, which boosts our economy. Plus, we're the envy of many countries, and we are. That's true.
Yeah, well, Sharon in Portsmouth, agreeing with what I said earlier, the guy from Republic said that the Jubilee is a bit of a minority interest, and Sharon here says explicitly the Jubilee is not a minority interest. And I do have to agree because, every town, every village, even street parties, everyone in every kind of corner of this country seems to be getting involved in the Jubilee celebrations. It's, definitely an interesting one. Paul?
Yeah, Kim says, I love the history, the intrigue and everything else that goes and has gone with the monarchy over the last 1,000 years. It's what makes us as a country. I mean, I have to say, on the tourism thing, I'm not convinced by that particularly. I mean, France got rid of its monarchy, America doesn't have a monarchy, all of these countries still attract millions of tourists each year. I think that's probably one of the weaker arguments in favour of keeping the monarchy. And there's quite a few weak arguments, to be blunt.
Some very strong ones as well for keeping it, Paul, don't worry. Arlene?
Just you keep digging that hole, Paul. Just you keep digging that hole. Kathy says, I'm proud to be British and proud to have such a successful royal family. It's time for the UK to be proud of our country and stop slating it. What fantastic ambassadors the royals are for the UK. The majority of the UK will be enjoying the 70th Jubilee with pride and admiration. And I think that's a very good point, actually, on the ambassador role that the royals play across the world. A lot of it goes unseen, and they do an awful lot of work on behalf of the government, I have to say. And I think it's something that's very strong around the monarchy.
And just a quick shout out for Marilyn in Frome, who agrees the Jubilee isn't a minority interest. And their sewing group are having their own celebration on the 6th of June. So Marilyn, to you and your sewing group, enjoy your celebration. And she also says, long live the monarchy.
Hear, hear.
Now, earlier this week, the world was shocked and horrified at the mass shooting that took place in an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, that left 19 children and 2 teachers dead. The horrific ordeal has reignited the long-running debate about gun control in the United States, with protesters and many political figures doubling down on calls to place more stringent restrictions on access to firearms. However, at a gathering of the National Rifle Association in Houston this week, former President Donald Trump suggested highly trained teachers should be armed in order to prevent such horrors occurring again. But what is the solution to ending the epidemic of mass shootings? And is the prospect of changing the Second Amendment a realistic one? Now, before we come into this discussion, I think the things that I found the most kind of shocking, and there are so many mass shootings that seem to take place in the US, but actually seeing some of the statistics here, the one that really got to me was that from 2020 onwards, the leading cause of death for children is now gun violence in the USA. And I just find that completely baffling. And I know there are huge cultural differences between the UK and the US when it comes to guns and weapons and obviously that Second Amendment right. But to me, Arlene, it's just baffling that there are not more restrictions in place, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the call to change the Constitution is going to be very, very difficult to achieve, if not impossible to achieve. But that doesn't stop various states being able to deal with background checks, for example, on people that are buying guns. We heard Kamala Harris talking about banning certain types of guns, assault rifles and what have you. I mean, why does anybody in their private life need an assault rifle? I just can't understand that. What I found quite depressing, actually, Deanna, when I was looking at this, apparently over this past 2 years, 7.5 million guns have been sold in America. And half of those that were sold were bought by females because they feel now that they need to carry a gun in their handbag in case they're attacked. Now, what does that say about American society today when women of our ages are carrying guns in their handbag? I find that incredible.
Yeah, I agree. But Paul, what are your reflections?
I mean, I loathe guns. I've never owned one. I would never want to own one. Every instinct inside me says, yes, of course, there should be a ban. I just wonder if that's taking too narrow a view of what some of the underlying problems really are in America. I mean, the truth is there are other countries who have relatively high rates of gun ownership, not necessarily as high as America, but relatively high, and have nothing like the culture of guns and mass shootings as we see in America. And I think we need a real close examination of why that is. Is it connected with mental health issues? Is it connected with drugs, for example? I think there's probably evidence suggesting that those things are very much a factor. So I don't know that a blanket ban would necessarily be the right thing, although I completely understand the calls for it. Because I think, not least, one of the difficulties would be how do you actually enforce it? There are 400 million guns in America. I mean, the idea that people are just going to a country that has such a gun culture, people are just going to give over their guns and say, there you go, take it away, I think is completely implausible, to be honest. So it's an extremely difficult and complex debate, and there are no easy answers to it, I'm sure.
I want to go back to the point in the intro there that Donald Trump made about arming teachers so that teachers are trained to deal with this if ever occurs in their classroom. But my interpretation is that what we're actually seeing are a lot of teachers wanting to leave the profession because they're so worried, so scared, so concerned, but also so concerned about the mental impact of these kind of gun drills and what they're having on the youngsters. I was reading one account, which was, I think it was about a 7 or 8 year old, and they did a gun drill and someone banged on the door and asked to be let in, like, please help, let me in. They asked the little kids whether they should let them in, and the little kid said yes. The door opens and the principal, wearing a mask, put their fingers to their head like that and said, bang, you're dead, you don't let people in. And you just think, kids at that age, the fact that that is normalised, the fact that gun drills take place in schools right around the USA just says to me that something must be done. Paul, I think you're right on that point about wider cultural issues, but well, the problem is that the gun lobby is so powerful, isn't it?
It is so powerful. I mean, I think on your point, which you put very powerfully, I think if your answer is we need to arm teachers in the classroom, then you're probably asking yourself the wrong question, to be perfectly honest, because I don't think that is the answer to any problem. You've got to look much more deeply and say, look, how do you get to a situation where you're not even contemplating the idea of arming teachers in a classroom? And you thought that my kids would go into a classroom and the teacher would have some sort of weapon there because they felt it was necessary to protect them because there is such a gun culture. Yeah, I mean, it's inconceivable in most other countries, but as I say, I just don't think I don't think it's as easy as saying ban everything, everybody hands their weapons over, and America suddenly becomes a land of milk and honey. That is completely fanciful, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the concerns that's been expressed by some of those who are more sort of anti-gun in the States is that it takes a disaster like this for the conversation to really be had, and then very little kind of seems to change in the long run. You know, going back to sort of Sandy Hook, and we're here again. Very scary stuff, but you know, I'm sure we'll see it unfolding. We'll see those protests and the calls to sort of de-weaponise continue. But get in touch with us. Let us know your views. What do you think America should do to try and get on top of the extensive gun violence that we are seeing there? But coming up next, we're joined by former chaplain to the Queen, Gavin Ashenden. But before that, here's your latest news with Olivia.
Thank you. It's just coming up to 11:33. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. Liverpool Football Club are calling for an investigation after fans were tear-gassed at last night's Champions League final. Police here say the violent clashes outside the stadium in Paris were the worst seen at a European football match. The Reds lost 1-0 to Real Madrid at the Stade de France. President Joe Biden will travel today to Uvalde, Texas, to pay his respects to the families of those killed in Tuesday's mass shooting in school. 19 children and 2 teachers were murdered by gunmen at Robb Elementary. It's the third mass shooting in the US in the last few weeks. Vice President Kamala Harris says the country should have the courage to take action.
We are not sitting around waiting to figure out what the solution looks like. You know, we're not looking for a vaccine. We know what works on this. It includes, let's have an assault weapons ban. You know what an assault weapon is? You know how an assault weapon was designed? It was designed for a specific purpose, to kill a lot of human beings quickly.
In Ukraine, a missile strike has destroyed part of a solar power plant in Ukraine as Russia's attacks in the country intensify. CCTV footage captured the moment the bomb hit in the Kharkiv region. Officials say no one was hurt and the power supply has been restored. It comes as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russian assaults in the surrounding area are becoming worse. The legendary jockey Lester Piggott, who won the Derby a record-breaking 9 times, has died aged 86. The 11-time champion and winner of 30 classics was widely regarded as one of the greatest riders of all time. During a career lasting almost 50 years, he rode nearly 4,500 winners. Mr Piggott's son-in-law, Derby-winning trainer William Haggis, confirmed his death in Switzerland this morning. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Stay with us. Deanna's going to be back in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, welcome back to The Political Correction. And loads of you getting in touch. We talked about the ABBA reunion and we're asking you which political figures from history you would like to see come back. And we've had loads of you get in touch. So Gordon, hey folks, I'd bring back Margaret Thatcher. Never liked her, but she got the job done. Imagine her view on the woke brigade. Pamela also says Margaret Thatcher, one of the best leaders we ever had. Britain would still be great under her wing. And Rick, I bring back Margaret Thatcher. She might save us again from the tyranny of the left. Speaking of the tyranny of the left, Paul, do you have some views for us?
As an antidote to that nonsense, let's have some lefties, shall we? Andrew says, I'd like to bring back Tony Benn to slap some sense into that son of his and give him a lesson in democracy over his anti-democratic Brexit stance. Julian says, bring Dennis Skinner back. He made politics fun to watch. That's certainly true. And another Andrew says, I think the best politician to bring back is Clement Attlee, who founded the NHS, and he should try and sort it out now. I think that's a good call, Andrew.
Arlene?
Yeah, so we've got some other Tories as well, just for Paul's benefit, of course. Liz says, I would bring back David Cameron. He loves the UK and its citizens and put democracy at the forefront, only backing out when he couldn't commit to something he didn't believe in. Given time, I believe he would have become a great statesman. Clive, on the other hand, says a politician he would like to see return is Anne Widdecombe. And Alan says, the politician I wish could return is the great Winston Churchill. He made his share of mistakes, but he had a great mind, knew all about leadership and how to inspire people. I think any politician from the past who brought character and who was able to speak out, I think, would be of interest. I mean, somebody with something to say. I think sometimes, Deanna, and you and I used to be a politician, you are a politician. Sometimes politics can be a little bit vanilla at the minute, and I think that's why people go for Tony Benn and Margaret Thatcher and Winston Churchill and all of those big figures.
That's it, the big characters. And then a couple more here. Timothy says the great Edmund Burke. his thoughts on our debt to those who came before us and our obligation to pass on our inherited culture to future generations encapsulate why I, a former leftist, am now a conservative. And Steve says, I would bring Oliver Cromwell back, a strong patriot who gave us our modern democracy. So
and an anti-monarchist, of course.
Yes. So definitely a wide range of views coming in there, but do keep them coming in. OK, Arlene, who would you bring back?
Well, obviously, I'd bring back Thatcher.
Not even a second's hesitation there. Paul?
Two, a person who's no longer with us, Tony Benn, we've already heard, fantastic parliamentarian, committed socialist, taught us an awful lot. A politician that's still alive and was a big hitter in the Labour Party back in the 1980s. He was also the MP for Dagenham, where I grew up, was Brian Gould, who's currently in his 80s and living back in his native New Zealand. He was an intellect, he was a great economist, he was a moderniser before Tony Blair. Actually didn't have much time for Tony Blair's politics. He was much more radical than Blair. And I have to say, when you look at the dearth of talent on the Labour benches nowadays, someone like him, I think, would be very, very welcome.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, given the economy, given the need to sort it out, we'd either go Thatcher or Norman Lamont, get him back in Treasury, and we'd be all right then, wouldn't we? Look at Paul grimacing over there.
I'm tempted to say, get on your bike.
Well, keep your views coming in. Now, at the gathering of the World Economic Forum in Davos this week, the boss of the Alibaba tech giant, J. Michael Evans, told delegates that carbon footprint trackers are in the pipeline to be rolled out in the near future. Mr. Evans told the conference the trackers will allow consumers to measure their own environmental impact by monitoring travel, what they eat and what they buy. Some have lauded the idea as an innovative move to save the planet, but others have scolded the prospect as a sinister infringement on personal liberties by unelected bureaucrats, garnering comparisons to the controversial social credit system in China. Well, joining us now from the United States is the founder of Unvoca Energy and host of the Talk Energy podcast, Max Gagliardi. Max, thank you for joining us this morning. So when you heard about this carbon footprint tracker, what was your first instinct?
Hi, and thanks for having me on. Yeah, when I first heard it, I mean, it wasn't a surprise. We've heard rumors of this. We've seen some things be rolled out that are like this. And the fact that it came from Alibaba's president, who is, a Chinese-based company and does have these similarities to the China credit score system, makes sense. And to me, it seems like a surveillance tool. And it's kind of being packaged as this green, this green initiative that we can help make things better. But ultimately, they're trying to collect your data and then kind of put a moral framework around energy usage, which I'm not a big fan of.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think personally, I agree with that sentiment. I guess there's one argument, isn't there, that it's good for people to be more aware of the actual kind of carbon impact of their individual actions. Would you kind of accept that as an argument?
I mean, I think it comes down to kind of this moralization of energy argument and what is a good use of energy, what is a bad use of energy. And I don't think anybody who's a serious participant in the energy space doesn't think that we need to do better in some ways, but I think that it comes down to what do we do about it? And so, look, if let's say using a corporate jet to go on a business trip versus going on a vacation with your family, who's to decide what's a better use? Who's to decide whether, using lights at your house or a clothes dryer is a better use of energy and what type of energy that you're using? I think trying to put that framework around it is just so subjective and is so nuanced. I think that it is something that could be dangerous, right? Because some people, have the ability to use different types of energy. They can go out and buy a different type of car or, sign up for a solar package for their house. Those are very expensive versus somebody else who's just trying to get by. They may not have those options. So it's just a slippery slope when we look at moralizing energy usage.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, Max, as well, one of the things that I find most uncomfortable about it is the fact that the people discussing this at the World Economic Forum, half of them flew there on private jets. It sort of smacks of some level of hypocrisy, doesn't it?
It does. I try to, look, those are their jets. And if they think that that's a great usage of that energy, that they can go and meet at this meeting and they feel like that's a good use of carbon for them, then I'm not here to judge them for that, although it is a little rich that they then use those jets and then go talk about, cutting emissions and doing all these things. And it's kind of one of these, policies like we've seen where certain people are kind of exempt from these things and others have to abide by them. It's like that recent proposal for a fuel tax in the UK where they were going to carve out corporate jets and not subject them to that tax, whereas people, everyday people would have to be subjected to it. So again, it just gets down to like who's following these rules and who isn't. And to me, like, it's an easy thing to pick fun of them about the corporate jets, but ultimately that's their decision, and that's the energy they decided to use.
Mm-hmm. And just let's talk for a second about data, because often with these new sort of tracker apps, people do get it, don't they? They're curious. They see their friends getting it. It becomes a bit of a craze, a bit of a trend. But the level of data that would hold about individuals and the way they're living their lives would be huge, and if in the wrong hands, could be quite sinister, couldn't it?
Yeah, look, CBDCs, I've said this a number of times. I just think it's dangerous, right? I mean, this idea that they can track what you spend, where you spend it, what activities that you're doing. In China, we've seen that they limit things like internet usage. They limit where you can travel. Ultimately, when you apply that technology to money, money is the basis of all freedom. If you can't go somewhere and spend money on something or give money to your favorite organization or charity, like we saw with the Canadian trucker protest in Canada and what they went to go then turn those people's bank accounts off. I mean, I would argue that, access to money is kind of a basic human right. And if they can turn that access off or decide what and when you can spend your money, do we really have freedom? I mean, at the end of the day, if you can't do the basic things you need to do, which require money, it becomes kind of a dangerous side effects to these tracking programs.
Mm-hmm. Well, Max, thank you for your time this morning. Max Gagliardi there, co-founder of Anvoca Energy and host of the Talk Energy podcast. Now, I'm delighted to say that we are joined by our very own former honorary chaplain to the Queen, Gavin Ashenden, because here on The Political Correction, as you know, we recognise that Sunday is a special day for Christians, but faith comes in all shapes and sizes. And given it is Jubilee week coming up, who better than former honorary chaplain to the Queen, Gavin Ashenden? Gavin, thank you for joining us this morning. Let's talk Jubilee. What are you planning?
Yes, very exciting. Well, there are a number of local church services and there are parties in the park. So it's one of those moments when the community gets together and celebrates. And my goodness, especially after COVID, I think we take any excuse, but this is one of the best excuses we could be offered.
Absolutely. And we're going to see celebrations happen right across the country, aren't we, to celebrate the incredible service that Her Majesty's given to our nation?
We are, but I think I have a slight concern that we just do nostalgia at the moment and we say, isn't this wonderful? She's very elderly. She's coming to the end of a reign. There'll be a new beginning. But I think we need to do more than that. I think if we're going to be grateful for the last 70 years, then we need to recognise some of the ingredients that's gone into making us grateful. And they're part of the cultural framework that we're about to lose. So, I mean, for example, it's the predominance of biology over imagination. It's a hereditary monarchy. It's the fact that it's not white privileged exercise. It's responsibility and humility, and our whole underpinning of this is the coronation oath and the tradition of God and absolute morality that we've had, and we're being presented with chaos and anarchy and relativistic morality. So there are three very important ingredients without which the monarchy wouldn't have survived, wouldn't be here, and we're going to let them go at our peril. So I think we should both celebrate the Queen's Jubilee, but at the same time have a much clearer sense that we want to hang on to the virtues that have made the reign great, her great, and have given us such depth and richness to our society.
I had a chap from Republic who think that this could, be the opportunity at some point in the future for it to be the end of the monarchy. But like you, the values with which the monarchy kind of held itself and the values they bring to our nation are far too great for us to ever allow that to happen, aren't they?
Well, you would think so, and that ought to be the answer. It really is a no-brainer. I mean, apart from anything else, the conversation in my lifetime has been conducted with, which of the political presidents of republics would you like to have in Great Britain? We might have had Tony Benn at one point. Much though I love him, it would have been an exciting and bumpy ride. But the fact is, what monarchy does is it saves us from political ambition and an abuse of power. But with this whole crisis in our culture at the moment, With the civil war that we have, we need to recognise that if we don't defend these values, nostalgia won't keep them for us. They'll be taken away from us by the people who have engaged in a long march to the institutions and are busy trying to impose a wholly different set of cultural values in which monarchy and what the Queen has offered will play no part whatsoever.
Well, Gavin Ashenden there joining us to discuss overall sort of morality, the monarchy, but obviously Jubilee weekend coming up next week. Thank you for your time this morning. Now it's time for an update on the week's biggest stories from the world of sport. And I'm delighted to say we're joined now in the studio by sports commentator and broadcaster Aidan McGee. Aidan, there is one big story dominating this morning, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Well, I mean, I suppose you could throw Lester Piggott in there as well. We'll touch on him in a minute. We just mentioned it to Paul just there off camera. But, yeah, of course, we had this unedifying spectre last night of chaos before a European Cup final. I don't remember a European Cup final or Champions League in its current guise. I don't remember it being delayed from as far back. You'd have to go back as far as 1985. Of course, 39 people died. Liverpool involved that night as well against Juventus at the Heysel Stadium in Belgium. Last night, different to that, of course. Well, of course, we never saw any casualties, which was the main thing. But when I look at the build-up to it, Liverpool fans, 60,000 of them in Paris. You're going to get a few ticketless fans there as well. There were some seen jumping over the fences trying to get in without tickets, or maybe with tickets, but frustrated that the gates weren't being opened. I only saw a handful, I must admit, on the ticket that I saw. So there was a build-up of people outside for 3 hours. It didn't really tally then later on for UEFA to say that when they delayed the kick-off, it was because Liverpool fans turned up too late. They were already there. And it looked to me as if the footballing governing body were kicking down, as they always do. We then saw the kick-off delayed by 36 minutes, and that's because, I mean, we could see before the game when the opening ceremony was going on that there were empty seats. And that was really weird because Liverpool fans began arriving 72 hours before.
And it wasn't just a few empty seats, was it? It was substantial.
It really was. It was very noticeable. I mean, you wouldn't see the colour of seats in a game like that, you know. It's just, you know, you just wouldn't do it. It wouldn't happen. So then there was the story that, oh, hang on a minute, Liverpool fans have turned up with counterfeit tickets. Now, again, very unlikely. You had that situation at the end where Andy Robertson, who was talking about Liverpool fullback, Scotland International, was talking about tickets when he should have been reflecting on the you might have expected him to be reflecting on the game, but he felt very angry. He said, I gave tickets and all players get an allocation to his relative or to his friends, and he can, you know, I said, I can assure you they weren't counterfeit. These are gilt-edged tickets offered to the players, best seats in the house. And yet when his acquaintance showed the stub at the gate, they said, no, it's counterfeit. So there's that as well. And then, you know, Liverpool's coach turning up an hour after Real Madrid due to the chaos around it. Now, I suppose we have to consider that this was a late call to have this venue as the Champions League final venue. It's an experienced, wizened venue, if you will. It was moved 2 months ago from St. Petersburg because of the political pressure on Russia. They didn't want to be seen to be holding, or the UEFA didn't want to be seen to be granting or persisting with the Champions League final being there. So it got shifted. And then what it meant was that the number of events at the stadium had to concertina and then moved down to accommodate the Champions League final. Big event, of course. Also, very easy for both fans in England and fans in Spain, as we saw last night, to get to. It's not like it was in Istanbul, which is a little bit further afield and difficult to get to.
And the Stade de France is a huge stadium, which has played host to numerous
France
big
98
events.
final. I mean, had they won the Olympics in 2012, that would have been the epicentre of the Olympic Games. I'm sure it will hold the Olympics in future. So Liverpool have called on an investigation. UEFA don't look very good because both of their statements look to be you know, bogus, quite frankly. The fans, there's no evidence of fighting or anything like that. There's no evidence of skirmishes between themselves and Real Madrid fans, which
sometimes there was tear gas being deployed.
This is the thing. So it's natural that fans will get irate when their tickets are bona fide and they're not being allowed in. The game, even after the delay had kicked off, and there are people outside, and they'd really jumped through hoops to get to Paris. The normal transport network wasn't up to full capacity post COVID. EasyJet cancelled about 200 flights, so it was a difficult thing to even get there. And as I say, lots of fans travelled without tickets. But again, UEFA had the gun has to be pointed at them or turned on them because if you have a European Cup final or Champions League final and it's an 80,000-seater stadium and yet you only give 20,000 to one set of fans and the same to the other, and you have that no man's land of 40,000 in the middle for what they describe as the football family, very nebulous term. You don't know who
and
that
lots
is.
of celebrities who, some of whom may never have been to a football game before.
You're limiting real fans, or fans who follow the team every week from attending, but they'll go anyway. They might hope to pick up a ticket here and there. They might hope to go to a fan park, which is again endorsed by UEFA. And we had this with the Europa League final 10 days ago. Rangers and Eintracht Frankfurt went to Seville. It wasn't equipped to cope infrastructure sense with that influx of supporters. And in a 43,000-seater stadium, they gave 10,000 fans each. 10,000 tickets each to two really well-supported clubs. Yeah. In fact, the two home grounds of those two clubs is bigger than the stadium they played the Europa League final at. It's just ridiculous.
Well, let's just quickly touch on today's football as well, because it's another big game.
Yeah, huge game. Huddersfield Town against Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest haven't been in the Premier League since 1999.
They stole our chances, stole Sheffield United's chances.
They did, but at least Sheffield United have had a few seasons in the Premier League in the last 20 years. Forest haven't got anywhere near it. They've not even been to a playoff final. This is their first appearance at Wembley since they won the League Cup back in 1992. So 30 years. They're queuing up outside the cafes outside around Paddington.
That was under Brian Clough, of course. That's how long ago.
It was his penultimate year, exactly. They lost to Man United in the League Cup, one of Fergie's first trophies. So big day for them. They're a really big club. The new generation of fans don't realise how big a club Nottingham Forest is. It's probably second or third behind Derby and Aston Villa in the Midlands in terms of the size of the club. And Forest will probably bombard me on Twitter and say we're bigger than Derby. If you look at attendances, I'd say probably not. But having said that, their manager's gone in there around about just before Christmas. I saw them play at QPR in November. They got a last-minute equaliser against us. I didn't think they'd be challenging, but a chance for them to go to Wembley and put that right. And Huddersfield as well, they'll have something to say in the Premier League between 2017 2019. Big chance for them to go back as well. Don't forget their parachute payments kind of dried up in this last year, so they've done well to get there today.
Quick prediction?
I think Forest are going to do it.
I think they will as well.
Brilliant. Well, big day for football, and thank you for joining us. You've been watching and listening to The Political Correction. Join us next Sunday at 10 a.m. for 2 hours of discussion, debate and analysis of the week's biggest political stories. But up next, as ever, it's the wonderful Alistair Stewart.
Well, looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking cloudier than yesterday, with showers developing for many areas. It will feel cooler too, so let's take a look at the details.
So let's zoom into the southwest of England. There's going to be a mix of sunny spells and scattered showers. The showers will possibly be heavy with hail and thunder at times.
Moving east, and it's a similar story for the southeast too. Bright or sunny spells and scattered showers, although the showers likely to be lighter.
South Wales is going to have a mix of sunny spells and scattered showers as well. Showers could be heavy with a risk of hail or thunder.
It'll be rather cloudy across the Midlands too, with only limited bright or sunny spells. Some showers are likely here too, but these will be mostly light, with many places staying dry.
And then if we move to the northeast, it's going to be a cooler feeling, especially along the coast. Also rather cloudy with limited bright or sunny spells. A few light showers possible, but mainly dry.
And as we head to Scotland, a similar story in the south of the country. Also rather cloudy here with a few bright or sunny spells. Mostly dry, but an isolated shower is possible.
And there'll be more in the way of sunny spells as we move to Northern Ireland, where it's going to be mostly dry, although an isolated shower is also possible.
And with the national picture, showers tending to ease through the evening, with clear spells developing for many areas. Winds remaining mostly light, and that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of your Sunday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.